Alrighty. So this talk is part of a series of talks on AI and innovation. Um, the reality is AI can help you do amazing stuff. But the reality is most of us are using AI like a search engine. And when you use it as a search engine instead of a partner, the results are not fantastic. Today, we're going to look at how you can use AI as a partner in the area of jobs to be done, which is one of my favorite tools and techniques. And we'll go through that a little bit. Jim, if you go to the next one. So, one of the things that's really important, whatever you're doing in life, is to have a direction that you're going. Because if you don't know where you're going, chances are you're not going to get where you want to go. And one of the things a lot of you want to do is build new products and services. And that is pretty hard. So, Jim, if you click next, if we look at the numbers, depending upon where you get them at, somewhere between 15% and 99% of products fail. And the reason why they fail is pretty easy to understand. If you click over the next one, Jim, is about half of those products fail because there's no job being done, meaning that you're not actually doing anything for anyone. Another half of the remaining are failing because no one's willing to pay for the job you want to get done. So, in fact, if your goal is to make products and services which are more successful, a jobs to be done methodology, which identifies a specific job and whether there's value in that job, can take you a long ways in terms of making yourself more successful. Click to the next one, Jim. When you do jobs to be done analysis right, you actually get three important things. One is you identify what the market wants, where are people looking for value? If you can identify where they're looking for value, you can explain to your people why this is important and establish a purpose within your organization. And when you have those two things together, what you can do is focus on ways to get the right skills to make stuff happen. And those three things coming together makes your chance of success much higher. So I talk a lot about jobs to be done in my first book, which is Cycles. Um, it was a book all about trying to help people innovate faster while reducing risks. There was a funny thing that came out just after I launched the book, and that was ChatGPT. And one of the problems was AI wasn't even in the index of my book. So I had to go back and relearn a bunch of this stuff. We have a new book which is coming out called The Generative Organization, which is all about how to do those things about innovating faster while reducing risk, exponentially faster through the use of AI. And what I think is cool about it is it takes the things that are important to do and makes it easier and more effective. It's also in a playbook format, so it's not just sitting and reading stuff, but actually stuff that you can use. Jim, to the next one. And the core message of the book, of the talk today, is about AI can be fantastic. However, a bad use of AI wastes a lot of your time. To work effectively, you need to do a few things. One is you need to know the business that you're working in. Two is you need to know the method that you're using. If you're in sales, you need to know something about sales. In this case, you need to know something about jobs to be done. You need to know something about AI and how AI works. And the penultimate or the most important thing is you need to keep your brain on during this whole process. So we have three people here. I'm Bryan Cassady. I'm an entrepreneur by heart and soul. I've done 11 companies in 6 countries. I have 8 exits along the way. I'm the author of the book Cycles and the new book there, and I'm on a mission to coach, train a million people. Beth and Jim, who you're going to meet along the way. Beth comes from the world of computer science, has turned to UX and product design, is a big fan of jobs to be done. And Jim is chief evangelist in Mural and has written one of my favorite books on jobs to be done called the Jobs to be Done Playbook. And I think you'll enjoy both of them and what they have to say.
Right. Great to be here, Brian. And looking forward to our conversation, Beth.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks for having us and inviting us. Brian's the one that really pulled us together. And if you're in the US, maybe you get the joke, the two guys, a girl, and a pizza place, because there was a show called that. But and you have to be old, relatively old, to get that joke. Awesome. All right. So I'm diving in, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so jobs to be done. It's really this unique lens for identifying what people truly value. I think there's a lot of organizations, people get excited about ideas and start with ideas and start building ideas. And really, jobs to be done is talking about what people are trying to achieve, what progress they're trying to make in their life, and it really flips the lens on all of this. I was at startups and got introduced to jobs to be done, and it just completely changed how I was doing customer discovery. Why it's so powerful? One, it helps predict market adoption. You're really talking about gaining confidence in what customers will value, so that what you're creating matches what they're actually going to value. And by doing this, you're having an outcome first lens. You are focused on what the customer is trying to do, what your, prospect is trying to do, and how you can help them make progress. And so you're really getting into their shoes at a deeper level, so that what you're building is not just requested features, but what you're building is things that they haven't even thought about that helps them along the path that they're trying to achieve. And really, a powerful thing about this is also a shared language for alignment. So if you nail down on a framework, you have a shared alignment across your organization for product, marketing, sales, to help deliver on that value and consistency, that there's people speaking the same language and working on the same type of goals together. There's one theory popularized by Clay Christensen. There's many approaches. As Bryan said, a great book is Jobs to be Done, the playbook, the Jobs to be Done playbook by Jim Kalbach. So we're leveraging that today. It's really approachable toolbox and builds on a lot of great frameworks. And today we're combining Jobs to be Done, one of my favorite frameworks, with AI. And a key thing, Bryan talked about it a bit, is keeping your brain on. You can incorporate AI as part of Jobs to be Done to go faster, but a key thing is not to have it think for you. And I love this example. You can see it through imagery. Like, it gets things wrong. It gave me three hands. It gave my children webbed fingers. It has, in images you can clearly see it. In text, it becomes a little bit harder because it sounds so right. But it lacks situational awareness. It's limited by its training data. It really flattens the human experience. And so currently it needs a little bit of guidance, and it needs to be a companion with it. You can't just let it go off on its own. So three main steps to avoid what we call garbage in, garbage out. Because you can put a lot of stuff in AI, get a lot of stuff back in Gen AI, and you might just be getting garbage. So one is knowing how to prompt. We're going to give a few tips today, just good prompts, clear context. Otherwise, your output will likely stink. If you like my little jokes here. Knowing the Jobs to be Done framework is big, so you know if what you're getting back is aligned. And then three, validating through real research. Especially, there's kind of a lot of surface stuff. It's pulling in a lot of information, but with Jobs to be Done, you get to dig deeper into some situations that just might be surface level with AI. So definitely validating through real research. Otherwise, you're just recycling assumptions. And what we'll cover today, where AI can help along this path. One, Jim's going to dive into creating hypotheses. Two, we'll touch on drafting the interview guide. So once you have these hypotheses, being able to talk to people and making sure that your interviews are taking the right approach, summarizing those interviews. And then we also have in our prompt library, which we'll be sharing with you all, is prompts for all of these things, as well as creating a workshop. And there's many other applications. We're not touching on like recruiting and interviewing with synthetic users, but there's a lot more out there where you can incorporate AI. So with that, I'll hand it over
Yeah.
to Jim to talk through the core
Yeah.
process.
Thanks so much, Beth. And some of what we're going to be showing here and in the next couple of slides, actually, I developed after I wrote my book. So the Jobs to be Done playbook came out in 2020. And since then, I've kind of refined and developed what we call a core process. Um, as Beth said, jobs to be done is a way of seeing. It's a lens, right? And it shifts your attention away from yourself, away from your product, away from your own brand, and really looks at what are the people that you're trying to serve? What are they striving to get done, right? The question then becomes, well, how do we investigate them? How do we research that, right? If we're not going out with our product or our solution, how can we understand what their job is? And we have this 5 stage process. First, you scope what you call your focus job. That becomes your unit of analysis. Then you can create a hypothesis. And this is a phase I've recently added, mostly because of AI, because we can create a very complete hypothesis of what the jobs to be done landscape might look like before we go out in the field in step 3 and do the investigation. And then you want to analyze that. And then you need to put it into action, activate, and you need to bring that back to your organization. What I'd like to do is talk about the first two by way of demonstration. So we're going to be looking at how do you scope your focus job, and then how do you use AI to help you create a hypothesis. Now, to do this, I'm going to switch tabs right now, and I'm going to demonstrate this in a virtual whiteboard. In this case, mural. Along with that core process, I've also created this jobs to be done canvas, and this shows the elements of the framework, right? The top part of the canvas up here is really about scoping your focus job. And there are some fields here that you can think through in step number 1 to scope your focus job. So let's dive into that briefly. For this example, Beth, I think we're going to be using traveling to and from work just as the space that we're in,
Yeah.
commuting to work more or less, right? Yeah. So we're going to be looking at traveling to and from work. And the first thing that I like to do is just kind of name the domain or the playing field that you're in so that you can begin the inquiry here. The first thing we want to focus on is the who, and we call this the job performer. So in the field of traveling to and from work, right, we want to ask the question, who's involved? Who's involved here, right? And I like to think of this as a collaborative exercise, right? So you can bring people together and start listing within that playing field who are all the players or actors that are involved. And I've done this in advance already. But as a team, you might say, well, there's commuters, right? Family members, other commuters, there's a manager and the boss, there's the work colleague, there are transit operators, and there might be more here. And this, Beth, is actually one thing that you can go to AI with and say, okay, if we're trying to get to and from work, who are all the people that are involved, right? So AI can be like a team member there, right? We have this collaborative exercise, and we can think of all of the who's in our space or our domain. Once you've done that and explored those, you want to think about strategically who do you want to create value for? And that's really the big question here is who do you want to create value for? And then you nominate them as your job performer, right? Okay, we want to create value for commuters. Do you agree, Beth? Is that a good target for us?
Yeah, let's do that for
Okay.
today.
Okay, for
I think
today.
this is key because people, are just out in the wild of traveling to and from work and
Yeah.
talking about everyone. It's like it's so hard
Right.
to know what you're doing.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Beth, because one of the benefits of the jobs to be done framework is focus. And it's very singular, but it actually forces you to get down to what's the most important. You always have to kind of prioritize and almost stack rank these things. Because if you look at all these people over here, it's like, oh, I want to focus on all of them. That's the opposite of the definition of the word focus, right? So let's focus on commuters as our job performer. Then what you do is you go to the other side, and this is also a collaborative exercise here. What are they trying to get done? Right? Well, they want to avoid stress. They need to get ready for the day. They need to get to work. They need to access a mode of transportation. And again, this is something you can do as a team and think about that job performer and list all of their jobs, right? The thing with jobs to be done is anytime you have human goals, there's always a hierarchy involved, right? And if you look at these jobs that we've listed here, they're at different levels of granularity. So what you need to do is come back over here to the canvas, and you'll notice that we've added this triangle here in here to show that hierarchy, that there are things that are top level aspirations, but there are also smaller jobs, which we can call job steps. One of the first things I want to do though is declare a focus job. And by the way, even though this exercise is singular, it's possible to do multiple canvases at the same time and say, what does it look like if we focus on work colleagues or on transit operators or some of those other job performers? So you can do this in parallel. But just for the sake of argument here, we're going to say we're focusing on the job performer, the commuter, and they want to commute to work. Now, what about all these other jobs here, though? And I can place these on the jobs hierarchy, which is implied here in this canvas, right? So be stress-free is more emotional or aspirational. Get ready for the day. That's what we call a related job. Accessing the mode of transportation. That's a smaller job, right? Within this job. So we put it below here. Coordinate transportation with others. I'm going to put that there. They want to become a reliable employee. That's more aspirational, right? So once I anchor this focus job here, I can then, relatively speaking, I can place these other jobs back on the canvas here. And we have a pool over here called related jobs. Now, related jobs are jobs that are about at the same level as our focus job that we're not going to focus on right now. And once we declare that focus job, everything is in relation to that focus job. And that's really important. Now, as I mentioned, you can use AI to help you think through some of these things, like help me think through all of the actors that might be involved. Help me think through some of these jobs here as well, too. And then you use the jobs to be done canvas to kind of zero in and get the right level of altitude and also think what comes before and what comes after. So this first step here is called scoping. And it's really the main purpose is so that we define a focus job, because in jobs to be done, that's our unit of analysis, right? If somebody comes along and says, yeah, but what about this other job, or what about this other person? You can say, that's great. We're just focused on this right now. And we go deep. We go deep, deep, deep on that focus job, right? Again, AI can help you do that. But I think where AI gets even really more powerful with the jobs to be done framework is when we move to the next stage, which is now creating a hypothesis. And what I can do is I can now focus on the bottom part of the canvas here, which is the analysis of the focus job. Basically, we break the focus job down into 4 different categories. What are the steps in getting that job done? What are the success criteria? What are the emotions? And what are the differentiating factors, right? So once I've nominated and declared this focus job, I can then flesh out this canvas. I'm calling that a hypothesis, right? Because we're gonna go look at AI and how AI might fill out the rest of this canvas, but that needs to be validated. So it's only just a hypothesis, right? So let's do some of that, Beth. Then, in step number 2 is we want to create a hypothesis. Yeah, Brian.
Could you go back for just a second?
Yeah,
So how do you get people to agree on this in practice? Because
yeah. Well,
that's just the thing where everybody gets it wrong.
it's discussion, and I think it's an examination of 2 things. One is you want the focus job to be something that's important to the people that you serve, right? So if you don't know anything about your market, you might have to go out and talk to people. This doesn't have to happen in a vacuum, right? What is and the other question there too, Brian, is this is this a job worth going after? Like, is this going to be even relevant in a year from now? And yeah, people are going to commute to work. And if we aspire to help people commuting to work, and that's important to them, then we've kind of satisfied the one half of the equation, is that we want the focus job to be something that's important to the people that we serve. The other part of it is what's strategically relevant to us. What are we passionate about doing? Where do we want to grow? And I think that's the biggest question, right? And we haven't given ourselves in this scenario a context of, what kind of provider we are. But let's say we are a software provider and we aspire to help commuters have a better commute to work, right? Then we need to examine our own strategy, right? So this focus job, you can think of it like a Venn diagram. What's important to the people that we serve and what's important to us right now. And that's that. So it's really about facilitating those 2 conversations to make that decision. But like I said, you could do multiple of these activities if you can't disagree, and you could compare them. What if we focused on another job, like getting ready for the day? And
Yep.
you say, well, is that strategically relevant to us? I don't know, maybe. And you have to have that debate, right? But the idea here is we have a structured thinking framework for that conversation to happen. And there's no cost in adding a sticky note and taking it off again, right? So it's really just about getting that agreement and alignment, Brian.
Yeah, I would add
But
to that doing
right.
multiple canvas. I did that with a
Yeah.
client, and
Yeah.
once they started trying to fill out a second canvas, they realized like all their conversations and everything was actually
It's
more
it went
interesting.
back to
So
the it went back to
if
the
you
other
start
one.
doing that, then it starts to become like, oh, actually we think we're more in
we
this area.
we
Yeah.
were on the right track on the
Yeah.
first one, right? But the other way to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Waterproof this is to move to the second step. And this is where it's amazing because with AI, we can create a hypothesis really, really quickly and kind of pre-validate that that's the right focus job by just by looking at the rest of the canvas, as you said, Beth, right? So
Mhm.
what we want to do is I just want to go back here. So if we have this focus job here, there's really four elements of information that we're looking for: the job steps, success criteria, the emotions, and then what we call differentiating factors. I can generate a hypothesis for those using prompts. And I have a prompt right here to create a job map, which looks at the job steps, right? And this is a little scheme that I use to write prompts. First, I describe the context, right? I'm working in the fields of jobs to be done, right? Then I give it a definition, what a job map is. And basically, I'm looking for a chronological sequence of steps in getting that job done. Then I give it an example, in this case, for shopping for a new home. And I show what it should look like. And then I give it specific instructions, right? So here's how the job steps have to be formulated, right? Each one must begin with a first person verb and so forth. And then I say generate 12 job steps right here. So context, definition, example, instructions. As Beth said, writing the prompts are really important. Let's tab over to ChatGPT. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that prompt into ChatGPT. But what I have to do is I have to change out this variable. We said this is a commuter and they are trying to commute to work. All right, that's all you have to do with this particular prompt is just change out that variable. Let's see what it comes back with. Of course, the last time we did this, I think it took inordinately long to do this.
Hey, it's coming back.
So this is pretty quick. And I limited it to 12 job steps here. Okay, if I want to commute to work, how do I do that? Using the jobs to be done framework and language, which expunges any reference to technology or solutions. So you notice all of these are independent of technology or solutions. Determine departure time, prepare items for the day, leave location, navigate to access point, and so forth and so on, right? What I can now do is I'm just going to copy those, Control C, simple Control C, go back over to my canvas, and then I'm going to paste those in here. Let's see, did that work? There it is. I'm gonna make those in a line. I like to make my job steps orange, so I'm just gonna change the color on that. And now what I have a hypothesis job map, and I'm gonna put that right in my canvas as a job for the job steps, right? And to the point of garbage in, garbage out, I need to read through all of these and make sure it followed my rules and that these are actually valid. And does this form a chronology and so forth? So I'm just going to do that. Leave current location, secure personal space, board, monitor progress, adjust the route, arrive. Yeah, it's pretty good. I'll take it as a hypothesis. And then what I can do is I can do that same thing for these other elements. So how do I measure success? What are the emotions that I'm feeling? And I've already done that, so I'm just going to bring those up here. So what I did to generate these, I haven't done any research yet, right? I haven't talked to any human beings. I'm only using AI. But I think that's the point, is that not only can we have this conversation to scope our focus job, but we can actually create a hypothesis around the jobs to be done framework with these different elements. Here are the job steps. Here are the success criteria, right? I want to minimize the effort required to plan the commute, minimize confusion about the route schedule, minimize the cost of the commute, and so forth and so on. Here are the emotions I might have. And here are the circumstances that make a difference. Here we call those differentiating factors. And now, Beth, having this also helps give us confident that we have the right focus job, right? But I
Yep.
think it also makes us a smarter researcher. Now, when I go into the field and I do the next step, which is investigation, I'm not starting from a blank piece of paper. I actually have a hypothesis that I can validate and dig deeper on, and it makes me a smarter interviewer, I believe, Beth. Right?
Yep.
And
Very
AI got me to a place that would take me a lot longer than I would have otherwise. So let me go back over to our presentation. So
Yeah, I
Jim,
what
was
we
gonna
talk,
say I
yeah,
think it's great to have as a straw man because then people can contribute. People can
that's
say, "Oh, I've heard this from sales and I've heard this," and you
right.
can have a
Yep.
conversation with that hypothesis. And you're leveraging AI as a third party kind of to
Yep.
help everybody comment on that.
Jim, I have a question for you there because
Yep.
there's this overload factor where I get all these post-it notes from AI.
Yeah.
Wow, that
Yeah.
looks pretty cool. What do you
Yeah.
do to keep people's brains on?
Can you repeat your question?
So I get all
What?
these post-it
Yeah.
notes. What do you do to
Yeah.
keep people's brains on so they actually
Oh, yeah.
actively read this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I do is think of, I mean, this canvas is kind of a structured thinking framework, but what I like to do are like activities. So one thing that I've done too is what you can do is you can have this job map here, and what you can say is which one of these is most important to the job performer, and which one of these is most important to us, or where is our solution most relevant in there. So give them a little thinking exercise because you're right. If you just present that, people go, ah, looks good to me. And they fold their arms and they sit back. So what you need to do is give them a little exercise, right? So the success criteria, right? And by the way, this is only about half the amount of success criteria that I could normally find. You say, okay, which ones of these are the most important, but also the hardest for the job performer to fulfill? And give them a little thinking exercise so they actively have to engage with this.
Yep. Another one I've done is I have people like dot vote them.
Yep.
Like which
Yep.
ones have you
Exactly.
heard? Which
Yep.
ones have you
Yep.
heard your like the customers talk about, or which one? And it gets people reading them and thinking about them. And then you also
Yep.
have an interesting look at like what
Yep.
internally do we believe are the biggest
That's right. That's right.
areas.
That's right. And then it's interesting because after the research, you can compare their initial voting back to what the market actually said and say, you guys don't know everything about the market now, do you? Right?
In a very
Which
kind
usually,
way.
in a very kind way, but that usually happens, by the way.
Yeah.
These kind of hypothesized voting exercises, as you put it, to turn out to be helpful, but not the complete picture. And I think that's what we want to do with the other three steps then is now we need to take that hypothesis, which we got to very, very quickly, by the way, and we want to validate it and explore it further.
Yep. Which is a great segue into the investigate. And I love interviews. There's other ways to investigate, but I find interviews are the best place to dig in. Um, when you're talking about Just Do Done, we're talking about their story. This is not about your product. You're not bringing your product into the equation yet. That can come later. You're focusing in on what their story is. So, how do they go about doing this job? What are their journey and their struggles? And using questions to dig below the surface and peel the onion, I like to say. Who was with you? What time of day was it? And so you start to build the story around it. Keep your product out of it for now. That can come later. And so some example questions that I think some come from your book, Jim, as well. But here's some example questions that you can have on hand. But the great thing is, you can start building your own script. Sometimes that can take a while, and that's another place that you can use a prompt to make this even quicker. Jim, you want to walk us through? So I have a brief one. Actually, let me share this one a bit. There's a short one here that's just putting you as a role. So you are an expert jobs to be done researcher trained in Jim Kovac's method. Um, and it gives you a role, like what do you want it to do? You want to generate a practical user-centered interview guide. And then I like to use sometimes when I'm being lazy, ask me questions to get input
Mm.
before creating the guide. And so it'll ask me questions. So that's a cheat on mine if I'm just like writing really quickly some prompts. But I have in the library that we'll share with you all a very detailed one that if you don't mind going back to your um, yeah, your
Is
stuff.
that the one? Is that the one? Oops, I deleted
Yeah, we
it by
lost it.
accident. Sorry about
That's all
that. Yeah,
right. That's
that was
okay.
my fault. Yeah.
I have an example in a screen. But anyways, basically you run this through ChatGPT or a similar tool that you want to use. And I have a more detailed one that like gives examples like Jim had before, to give an example, it'll give more of a step by step. So it's very long and won't fit on a single slide. But let me see if I can get there we go.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
Okay, so once you have a guide, it'll give you some of those questions that we shared. You're interviewing your target audience. So that could be maybe you are giving an incentive to people who are your current customers. Maybe you are recruiting through you can recruit through social media, or there's other tools where you can find people to talk to. Usually, giving them a little bit of an incentive helps. And I recommend, 7 to 10 interviews are great, at least five, because you'll start to see different themes and different types of people that you can start to organize. So next we'll get to analyzing it. Um, so I don't trust AI tools to summarize all of my interviews. I also took a course where we tried out all of the new tools that are out there, and it just never gets it 100% right. Maybe it will one day. But what I like to do is I use these prompts to summarize an interview I just did. So I come from an interview, I get the transcript, and I use the transcript and a prompt, and it will give me back the results, and I gut check that. So in this example, we run an interview. Let's say I interview Bryan about commuting to work, and you can use this prompt. So your job's to be done researcher. Your task is to analyze this transcript where a person is asked about commuting to work and they're a commuter, and extract the insights. I have a more detailed one that maps to Jim's template, so that you can, plug and play the other things in there in the prompt library. But essentially, it'll give you analyzing that one interview. Just a note, just privacy and security requirements. Make sure you understand that and what tool you're using, and if you have any PII and you need to strip it out. But also just don't trust this fully, because if you run the exact same prompt, exact same transcript, you will get different results sometimes. But I love it as a gut check. So I use it like, here's an example result. I just did a fake interview of
Mm.
work. Um, and so I'll read through it, like Jim said, walk through it, and kind of gut check it. You could do this as a team if the team listened to the interview. But it does weird things. Like step 8 says prepare lunch and clothes the night before, but that is after walking to the train station to the office. So it gets it just doesn't
Yeah.
understand certain things. But it's nice because it will pull out outcome statements. And I'm like, yeah, they did actually focus a lot on being concerned about oversleeping, or,
Mm.
the anxiety caused by being behind schedule. So you can start to leverage this and add in what you heard, and kind of remove things that you don't think you heard, or go back to the transcript to see what was really said. And then from there, so let's say you have 7 transcripts that you analyzed. This is where I think a workshop is great. Bringing people together. You can look at the job steps that came from each of the interviews. You can look at the unmet needs, and what are the themes that are coming about? Like, is there these 3 interviews are kind of similar in terms of their challenges and what they're trying to accomplish? Are these other 3 interviews similar? And you start to have these discussions that are really at the core of this. Like, are there 2 different jobs here? Is someone trying to commute to work, but this other person is trying to exercise during the day?
Mm.
Do we need to think about a different type of job? And so this collaboration is really important when it comes to analyzing. And I think I would love if AI could do it all for you. You just kind of press a
Mm.
button, the easy button. But alignment really happens in this process, not just the output. And it helps, I think there's so much out there about people just not being engaged in work. And I find this is when teams are so energized, engaged, bought in. And again, humans being the differentiator. So if everybody's using these tools, then your differentiator is the humans that are involved. And just always make sure that you're checking that work. So the last step, because I want to leave time for us to have some discussion, is activating. So you have all of this data, you did the workshop, and you're starting to see probably five, seven, maybe 10 things coming up that are like, oh, it seems like there's a lot of challenges in these areas. What are the biggest struggle points that people are having in this jobs to be done? So I like to take that from the workshop and we put them into these jobs to be done statements. So when I am commuting to work via a car, maybe I struggle to do this. Help me. What do they need help with so that I can, which is kind of what they're aspiring to complete. So an example here, let's say you are working on an app. So Jim talked about, your context is really, we kind of made this generic for everyone, but your context is really important. Let's say you have a commuting app, and you're trying to increase retention and satisfaction. And so what you're started to recognize is that when people are commuting to work via a car, they struggle to adjust travel for disruptions. So help them adjust their route so that they can reduce delays and feel more in control of their schedule. So I kind of, backpedaled this from Waze used to not have kind of the rerouting, but they came up with the rerouting feature.
Mhm.
So that's where you can leverage these jobs to be done to really get to the heart of what people are trying to do and then think of the solution. And that builds the roadmap. So I like to use dot voting. So you have all of these statements and you can dot vote with the team of like, what should we really be working on now based on what we want to accomplish as a company, what we're trying to do as a team. And you can start putting this is now, and these are the backlog of jobs to be done. And as we learn more, maybe this will adjust. So in the end, you'll get to a roadmap that is your alignment with the team. I mean, obviously, it's not the end solution, but at least you guys are all focused. You can think about how sales can think about that, how marketing can think about that, how product can think about that, and you're identifying and testing these solutions or things that you're doing together to solve for that struggle. Okay, I think we left more time for questions here. Hopefully I didn't go too quickly, but Bryan, you want to take over from here?
Yeah, no, I'll go for it from here. I mean, what I love about this process is the fact that you're actually having active discussions going back and forth within
Right.
your team. And if you're doing this right, you're adding AI not as a solution, but as a team member that actually helps you clarify those discussions.
Yeah.
And, you know, the hard fact on this is you don't need us to do this stuff. We actually provide guidance. You can just follow the steps, go forward. But if you go to the next one, what we do have
Great.
is go back one is expertise to help you define your challenge, tools to help you do this better, faster, and easier. And I do notice that some people have said we're fun in the process because actually life is more than just, you know,
Mhm.
hard grind, but actually getting stuff done in an effective way. You go to the next one. Click forward, Jim, if you would.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've talked about here is the cheat sheet. And if you'd like, we're going to offer you a cheat sheet for some feedback on how we make this talk better, what's interesting, what's not interesting. You can take a picture of the QR code, which is there. I will put something in the chat. But basically, it's a way for you to get interesting information that can help you go one step further in the process we started with today. Um, Jim, if you go to the next one. So what you'll get is somebody asked earlier about my book. You can get a copy of the book. It's an educator version which says you can't sell this and things like that. But you'll also get the slides from today, the video from today. You'll get some templates, and you will also get a a new chapter out of the upcoming book that's coming out about jobs to be done. Now, the most important part of this talk is the next slide coming up, which is ask your questions. And I've
Mhm.
seen some questions coming in the chat. For those of you who are shy, put a question in the chat. For those of you who are not shy, just reach out and tell us what you think about this.
While they're doing that, Bryan, I just wanted to react to the comment that you made about viewing AI as part of the team. And I see it as very much complementary, even though it can think very, very quickly, and the results on the surface appear to be, amazing. Like, here, it just did it for me. You do have to stop and use your brain and make sure it's not garbage in and out, garbage in, garbage out. But I think doing that as a group though is important. That's the key part, right? I agree, Beth, that humans are the differentiator, human thinking and human thought. But we rarely, in our work, in our organizations that we work with, we rarely make decisions in a vacuum by ourselves, right? It's always aligning with the people to the left and to the right of you, right? So thinking about those two ingredients, then we have a team that has to make a quality decision that is now augmented by AI. And throughout this entire process that we showed, those 5 steps, right? There are team discussions that you should and can have, which, Bryan, I would argue make things more enjoyable and fun.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
I'll respond to one of the questions around interviews and versus surveys.
Mm,
There's definitely a lot of different thoughts out there about whether you need interviews or not. Personally, I
mm,
find if you start with surveys, you are likely bringing in assumptions that you have. And like, yes, you could use AI to help pressure test those assumptions. So that's one layer that might be a little bit better. But I find that if you are doing the interviews right, you are digging below a surface level that is in probably in your organization and is probably in your AI assistant, that you're able to get a layer deeper if you're doing the
mm,
interviews right. And so that's why I really focus on the interview part, even though it can be hard to get people on the phone. It just for me has been game changing in terms of what you can learn and the ahas that come out of that versus the other methods. So surveys are great to further validate and pressure test the direction that you're going in. I think it can help build confidence in a
mm,
direction. I've done another methodology where you do the interviews and then you do really deep surveys. If you're familiar with Tony Olick, he talks a lot about those surveys, and that's great to pile on. But I just find there's something unique about interviews, and that's where I would highly recommend them, which I would tie back to. I think Matt, your question, your statement on LLMs can take on multiple personas, and so as a
mm,
team of assistants, again, I think that's a layer up from internal speak. So there's like internal speak about, and then that can help pressure test that internal
mm,
speak. But then again, I find there's limitations with LLMs because it's using a ton of information, but you don't get that story, that human
mm.
depth of what's really going on.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Beth. I totally agree. I think it also comes back to decision making, that at the end of the day, humans inside of your organization and a group of humans have to make some decision. And if you don't have that real world exposure, if you've never talked to a commuter or if you've never seen people commuting, right, other than your own experience, you could get a ton of stuff out of AI, but you don't have the sensibility to be able to interpret that. So not doing interviews, and the reason I say that is because there are practitioners of jobs to be done that say you don't need to do interviews anymore. I think that's dangerous because you don't get the decision making insight that you need to internalize to be able to interpret the data that comes out of AI.
Yep. Yeah. The only other thing I would say is also the stories. Like when
Mm,
I'm doing product development and product management, and if the team had those stories, you remember those
mm,
stories
hmm.
so much more than what the AI is going to give back to you. Like it
Right.
is, you feel the emotion of the person telling you that story,
Yeah.
and it sticks with
Mm,
you as you're doing product development. It's
yeah.
like a game changer.
Plus, AI misses things. I did a jobs to be done analysis using that process that we showed. I scoped the focus job. I did my hypothesis using AI. In the first interview, within the 15 minutes of the first interview that I was doing, I found 3 success criteria that AI missed. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If I'm only 15 minutes into this, what else am I going to find that AI missed? Right?
It shortcuts some things, but yeah, it needs to be done
Yes,
right.
exactly.
Chantal, can I ask you a question about your question? It says, have you considered setting up AI agent teams instead of working with prompts? Tell me what you
Yes.
mean by that.
I don't know if everybody knows, but for me, an AI team is as in an employee, a digital employee within artificial intelligence within, for example, ChatGPT, and it's the difference is that you are giving it not giving it a task and tell it what to do, but you're giving it a goal. You tell
Mm,
it in the end, this is what I want to achieve, and these are the tools you can use, and this is what you are not allowed to do, and this is what you are allowed to do, as if you are uh, um, introducing an employee to your work of
mm,
way of working.
mm,
And I was thinking somewhere, instead of just using this, copying everything and putting it
mm,
into a prompt, you could automate it more and dividing it amongst several agents. So
mm,
several team members, artificial intelligent team members, going from one to the next with
mm.
human interference in between or at the end and the beginning, etc., etc. I hope this is clear what I'm
It
Yes.
saying.
is.
Yeah.
That's an intriguing idea. We have gone one step further than what we showed you here today, and I actually created a couple of GPTs that will query you and actually walk you through all of the steps and the sub steps in kind of a chat mode. But those GPTs don't have a persona like you're suggesting to kind of create a synthetic employee that knows how to
Yes.
do that a little bit more dynamically. No, I basically just have a query, a structured query in a GPT. So you don't actually have to copy and paste each time. It's kind of already there. But I think what you're suggesting goes one step further, and I quite like it.
Yeah.
I quite like the idea.
Yeah, I'm just working
Yeah,
on developing one because the main
yeah,
difference is that whether you're giving it a task, a specific
yeah,
task, or whether
yeah,
you're giving it a goal. This is what I want to
yeah,
achieve, and then it
yeah,
can think of its own, and
yeah.
it can develop a memory on what
Hmm.
it has learned from previous jobs to be done.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So,
I'm in a chat with a tool that is supposed to be doing something like this. So I think there's only so much time in the day to be trying out all the new things because it seems to change daily. But I think that is the direct,
Yeah,
like I
we're
think what you're
going too
talking about
fast. I know, I know.
is the direction that it's going. Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is leveraging AI at the right points and leveraging human interaction at the right
Hmm.
points. So
And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
and there's another question I have, which is a lot more simpler. I sometimes find it hard to convince my customers that we have to start looking at the jobs to be done because they
Mm.
tend to think, oh, we don't need that. We already know our customers. We know what they
Yeah.
want. And I always tell them, you don't
Preach.
know what they want, and the customer doesn't even know it themselves. So,
Yeah.
Yes. I would say I feel that and I have that same thing and I think there are different I almost think of the jobs to be done of implementing this and the different stages of where they are and so sometimes if they're way too early in this step of knowing that this is the right tool then I kind of educate a little bit and
yeah.
it's not the
Yeah.
time and I have had people come back 2 years later that have said I should have listened to you like they went out and built thing.
Yeah.
And I'm working with a founder now who built their own thing. And in addition to just, hiring someone off the street to build their own thing and just wasting a lot of money.
Mm.
Uh,
Mhm.
I think there is just some people are not further along on that spectrum, that journey. And so
Hmm.
recognizing where they are and what they need help with to get over that struggle point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
theoretically they should start with it, I believe, but in practice
And,
they start using it or they start wanting it when they
Yeah, we
start
can
feeling
talk
the
more.
pain.
But we can talk more. I have a group that I talk about this with. Exactly.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
from my perspective, any organization, whether it's commercial or not, is in part in the business of predicting human behavior, right?
yeah,
That your business success relies on somebody taking action, right?
yeah.
Why are they going to pay you money or their attention, right? And knowing that or having a causal way to predict that human behavior should be core to any business plan. But for some reason, in a lot of organizations, there's a very low tolerance for
Hmm.
spending a little bit of time on, and it's not that much time. It's just a little bit of time. And I'm not sure why that mindset is so widespread, Chantel. but it is. And I think one of the points that we have here is that you can kind of get over this fear of I don't have time for big upfront research, right? You could say we can actually, with the help of AI, we can actually move quickly, and we can give you that customer insight in a shorter amount of time or with less effort, right? But I don't know what's behind that mindset. For me, it's a lack of curiosity and a lack of humility. I think the combination of those two things and again, I think the point that we wanted to show is you can kind of get over that hurdle and you can penetrate that mindset a little bit better, but using AI to accelerate your insights.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's usually a quick aha erlebnis,
Right,
what I
exactly.
call it.
Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you.
So I wanted to answer a question and then move it over to Roland. So what is the biggest trap about jobs to be done in AI in general? I think for me, quite clearly, it's a question of deep thinking. Do actually people really think and conceptualize and keep things going? And the problem is when AI comes in the room, we tend to turn our brains off even more than we did before. Roland, you got a question. You had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, thank you. So I wasn't familiar with the methodology, but I can really see the beauty of coming to the customer value, to the true customer value. So thank you also for providing the tools on the canvas. That's quite helpful. But how do you come back, or what's the best way to come back then to the features? I mean, product management, marketing, and so on. They need the right thing and saying it makes your life easy, or you will be on time all the time. It sounds nice. It's the value for the customer, but how do you translate it then back in features, which you can market, which you can make graspable, and where you can address or even combine uh, product values or several values of a product?
Yep. I'm happy to start, and then Jim, feel free to, because I know you're also
Okay.
product. So we had to rush it at the end a little bit, but you have a roadmap that is, I like to do roadmaps based on the jobs to be done. And so our example, like if we were to take our example of the struggle, go back to the struggle points. Um, so we recognize that, you know, we're an app and we're trying to improve the usage and the value of the app. That a big point is the I need help or I struggle to adjust travel for disruptions. Help me adjust my route. And so that right there, you know, it doesn't give you the exact solution, but it gives you the starting point to work with the product team. So I've done this you know, in the ed tech world, I had a UX designer, a product manager. I was a product manager and developer, and we sat down and we were prototyping together. And now you can prototype even faster than back then, but you can start prototyping. What does this look like from a feature perspective, and could cycle back with customers around, you know, is this solving for this problem? And so I think it's very I come more from the product side, but that through line of getting to using this to then solution. So you're getting very clear on the problem space to then solution, and you can come up with multiple solutions and kind of iterate through that piece. But when it comes to sales and marketing, I mean, you have some of the language here so that when that is, if that's a differentiator, you have that language. Obviously, you wouldn't say it in these exact words, but you have that language to then carry through to sales and marketing if these are now your differentiators from any competition. But that's less my area of expertise.
Yeah, and that's that last phase in our five-step process, which we called activate. And this roadmap is just one example, Roland. And I think that's just started to also hint at ideation, right? And I would ask you, Roland, like where do requirements come from right today in your organization? Where do those requirements come from? Right? And very often they're from technical constraints or deadlines or financial constraints. And what we're saying is that the main input into generating feature requirements, right, should be getting the job done for the customer. So you can, as Beth just described, you can take that problem statement and then start to generate not only requirements, but what's the experience supposed to look like, right? Another technique, so road mapping, ideation would be the next steps here. Another technique that I've had success with we call it pain matching. And I learned this from our partner company that I work with called Vendbridge they're in Switzerland, and they do jobs to be done analysis. And what you do is you take those top unmet needs and you compare them to your current capabilities. So what you're actually doing is saying, here are the unmet needs in the market. Here's the solution as described by discrete capabilities. And then you have a matrix and you can evaluate how well you're currently meeting the market needs with your current solution. And what that generally shows are gaps. From those gaps, you can then take that into the road mapping or into the ideation, right? So the point is there are these structured thinking frameworks that you can use in the last stage there, activation, to translate the insights from jobs to be done into something more tangible, like a feature concept or a roadmap or something like that.
And Jim, I know you are running to another call. I'm just
Yeah.
giving you a heads up. It's
Yeah, thanks for
11:59.
that. Yeah.
We'll stay on
Yeah.
for anybody else, but
Okay.
Yep.
So,
Ju-
so
Just to
go ahead.
just to add to it, my question or why I'm asking is because I'm in technology scouting and looking, and we get a lot of stuff which has a certain focus, and I recognize that the true value for the customer is often very biased based on where it came from. So, and I'm looking into solutions into methods and tools, and this could be one of them to dissect something which it's really cool, has a certain meaning, but how to use, AI, these tools, the methodology to find either further or complete other true customer values, which even the inventor is not thinking about because they're really very narrow in their from the development perspective. So, and that's something, and I think there's some cool things in here which are helpful for me.
yeah,
That
I'm happy to chat more on this. I find I work with a lot of startups that have an idea and they come to me with the idea and they're like, help me build it. And I roll back and I say, okay, what are we trying to achieve? And get to their hypotheses based off of this idea that they have. And then that sometimes can start into them recognizing their own assumptions that they're making and poking holes and pressure testing. And then it can turn into being more open to this type of process.
so what
Well,
I'd like to do
thanks.
is respecting the time that we have here. So we're going to close out, but I think the message at the end is about having method expertise, thinking frameworks, using AI in an intelligent way. Beth showed you a lot of different ways there. And lastly, is keeping your brain on in the process. And if you do those three things, you will get great results. And I wanted to thank all of you for your time today. There are some free goodies if you give us some feedback. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you all. And feel free to reach out to chat more.
Thank you. Yes, I will
Oh,
do.
we love talking about this stuff.